Hi, everyone. So I guess you have to. Okay, more people are joining. Perfect. So, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Um, we are trying to figure out the platform, so please bear with us. We are here and ready to present. We'll probably give it a few more minutes until we have more individuals.
Yeah, it's like a little disorienting not seeing people. So it's like,
I agree. I was expecting to see
hello.
faces. So it just sounds like you and I are doing a presentation for you and I. Where do you see people chatting? Like under events, there is people, so I see the list of people. But how about like where they are replying back?
But also under session and then chat, where you see chat, polls, people.
Oh, got it.
Do you
Yes.
see that now?
Yes. So
Okay.
those are the people. Oh, I was not looking at the right list because I saw a Greg who's the president of PCDN. I was like, oh, he's known in our session. This is amazing. No, okay. So we are seeing Atia, Rebecca, and Anastasia, right?
Yes, it looks
Okay.
like.
Okay. Well, hello, ladies. Thank you for being on time. We appreciate that. Too bad we can't see you moving, and we can't even see your faces. But I guess this is the limitation of hop in. But at least we know who is joining us today. Thank you, Atya and Anastasia, for saying yes and yes. We're doing some sound check. Um, So if that's okay with everyone, we'll just give it another maybe 3, 4 minutes. In the meantime, if we can please ask you, I know that we see the name and then your affiliation, but maybe just tell us where you are joining from, um, and anything that why you joined today's workshop. Anything that you can share with us so that we can personalize some of the sharings today. Um, that would be great. Maybe just like a hello from Earth and hello from New York. That would be great so that we know who's from. There you go. Thank you, Shauna. With all of you today. Shauna, if you would like to start sharing your screen, and we'll just welcome people as they plug in. Yes,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay.
Yes, great. Thank you, Grace, for sharing our bios. Just clicked on the link. Thank you so much. So, yes, Shauna, do you want to kick us in and just introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce mine? And yeah,
Sure. Yeah. So, hi, everyone. My name is Shanna Kurgan. I am a monitoring and evaluation officer with the Institute of International Education. What a mouthful. I've been with the research, evaluation, and learning team at IIE for just over 2.5 years, and really excited to share a little bit about how we've used participatory photography today. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Selma.
well, hello again. Thank you all for joining. My name is Salma Talha Jibril. I am based in New York from Roosevelt Island. I have been with IIE for close to 3 years as a research and evaluation specialist. And like similarly to what Shanna just shared, we're really excited to be sharing with you some of the methodologies that we've been experimenting in 2 of our current ongoing projects. Yeah, so next slide. Perfect. So the session aims to introduce participatory photography for evaluation and engagement broadly and present 2 small case studies, as I said, currently experimented by the Research Evaluation and Learning Unit, REL, at the Institute of International Education, or IIE, in ongoing international higher education exchange program evaluation projects. So, through the case studies, we are hoping to present and engage with you on the benefits of using photography as a qualitative and participatory data collection method, We will share with you our learnings and considerations to keep in mind if you are considering this methodology for your projects. My colleague Shana will present the first case study that specifically uses Photovoice for an ongoing program evaluation. And I will share how the Ford Foundation International Fellowship Program, or IFP, and the IFP Tracking Study uses photo series for alumni engagement and reflection on scholarship impact. A little disclaimer before we move forward. Shana and I are not experts in these methodologies. We are experimenting them and are happy to share reflections and collaboratively discuss the pros and cons of photography as a data collection method. And finally, we would love to hear from you and how you may use this in your work, or how you actually already used it, and you think that you have some learnings that you would like to share with all of us today. We are very much eager to hear your thoughts at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, visual methodologies are a collection of methods used to understand and interpret images. These methods have been used for a very long time, particularly in anthropology and sociology. However, more recently, they have been used in the field of higher education scholarship to explore impact and particular participant experiences and meaning making. So this is to say that the use of images is not a new methodology. For instance, both autophotography and the photo elicitations are visual methodologies in qualitative research that have been used for quite a long time. The first, so the autophotography, asks the participant to take photographs of their environments and then using the photographs as actual data. On the other hand, the photo elicitation is using photographs or other visual mediums in an interview to generate verbal discussion, to create data and knowledge. In this case, images are used as a tool of assessment, as stimulus to trigger responses, or a means of presenting results. With that said, my colleague Shanna will present the first case study where Photovoice is being used in a higher education scholarship program in the field of agriculture. Shanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Selma. Yes, so very happy to introduce the ATI, or the Agricultural Transformation Initiative. Just as a background on this project before we jump into a bit more about the methodology, the ATI primarily exists to strengthen the capacity of Malawian researchers and professionals by providing master's and postdoc level scholarships. Their main goal, and this is just one part of the entire ATI, the scholarship and fellowship program, the main goal of the initiative is to reduce tobacco dependency in Malawi because it is such a huge part of their economic system. And so on our side, we've been employing mixed methods data collection, including surveys, interviews with multiple stakeholders, the fellows and the scholars themselves, which is just another way to refer to the master's students and the postdoc students. We've conducted focus groups, and we've employed the Photovoice methodology. Throughout the section, you'll see a few photos, and I hope that you can see the photo credits because the credit is all due to the fellows and scholars themselves, but I just wanted to also share and highlight some of the photos that have been collected from this methodology. And so using Photovoice with the ATI, and maybe before I get into the why, I'll just do a little bit of the what. So Photovoice, really the way that I like to think about it is giving voice to participants through photos. It's referred to as a lot of things, participatory photography being another name, but generally on a spectrum from highly participatory to more participant-led, and I'll get into that later. Just using photos to guide the data collection. Having giving participants themselves a bit more voice in what they're bringing to the discussion, which really frames the researcher or the evaluator's understanding of the program from a lens of the participant and their experience. And so why did we decide to use it with the ATI? The method, first of all, fit really well with the program's goals. It being such a focus on transformation, with a lot of the scholars and fellows being out on the ground, in the fields, in the labs, working, being able to visually document their transformation of their concepts, but also the work that they're actually doing, and centering their voices, raising their capacity. That just all really fit well with the methodology itself. From a more planning perspective, the stakeholders were really open-minded and willing to try a new methodology. This is the first time that our team was implementing it with a program, and so I'm really grateful that the stakeholders were trusting of us to allow us to implement this. And then also just in a way that's like quite humbling, I know nothing about agriculture or tobacco reduction strategies in Malawi. It's such a highly context-dependent program, and so relying more heavily on participant experience really filled gaps in my knowledge that I just don't have the time, the space, and the experience to know so much. So why not rely on the wealth of experience and information that participants already bring with them? From a more REL IIE team focused side, it was a way to expand our team's capabilities. And so we're hoping that with this kind of as a pilot, we're able to implement this in more of our programs going forward when it makes sense. And so I'll give an overview of how we conducted this methodology with ATI. And so I mentioned before that there's kind of a spectrum of highly participatory photo voice to more of a participant-led. In a lot of the research and background desk, exploration that I did on this methodology, depending on the population, the purpose of the program, the purpose of the data collection, some people go so far as to provide the cameras to participants, lead workshops, teaching photography methods, guiding participants on how to take a quality photo, discussing what we should be taking photos on. Our implementation of this methodology was a bit more participant-led in that it was semi-structured. You'll see here, there was a survey question where we did provide the prompt. In this case, a photo that illustrates the participants' views or experiences with agricultural transformation in Malawi. And so we provided the prompt, but still the participants were leading the discussion with their photos. So this is how we collected it through a web-based survey. And then there was a lot to the selection to try to mitigate some bias, which just I think is a reality of working in evaluation. We focused on factors of program type, so scholars and fellows, gender, to try to make sure there was gender balance, and quality of the photo, and to make sure that they understood the prompt in selecting and bringing together participants to a focus group. So once we brought them together in a focus group, this was done virtually as it was still conducted during the time of COVID. We're still in the time of COVID, we're still virtual. But it was quite easy for us and for our group that everyone had internet access to just simply share this on my screen and have it visible to all of the scholars so that they could talk about their photos, but also see everyone else's photos. And then this was kind of the structure of our discussion. I've separated it into the three kind of sections of the interview. And I've starred places where, from what I've seen in the research on Photovoice, are pretty standard elements of carrying out this methodology. But it also means that there's a lot of places where you can be flexible. And of course, you can be so flexible as to let the photos and the fellows guide the discussion completely. And so that's what I mean when I say this was semi-structured. But generally speaking, it starts with a section where the individual shares about their photo, why they chose the photo. You can open it up then to the group discussion to see how others relate to this photo, reactions, expressions towards the photo. And then that's repeated for everyone's photo. So this can take a bit of time, but so worth it to give everybody the space to discuss their photo and share and learn from each other, and to see their work, I think was as helpful for me as a researcher and just as helpful for everyone who participated. And then finally, we closed out each focus group with a more thematic discussion, including just general overarching themes that came out of the photos, which happened to be extremely useful then in my qualitative analysis. It just already kind of gave me some of the coding that I needed to go forward with analyzing this. And I think analyzing Photovoice and photographs is a completely other session, but this was extremely helpful in that. And then there was also a metacognitive element to the thematic discussion in which participants could reflect on what it was like to actually take a photo, because it's not something, while as Selma mentioned, it's not new. I think it's still not mainstream where people are so used to being asked to represent their experiences with photos, at least not in this group, in this population. So there was a moment to reflect on the process and for us to learn on implementing the process. And I just wanted to share a few of the photos. So I think something that I really enjoyed about implementing this photo is that it just built a lot of trust and communication between the participants and myself, especially when researchers are often seen as this distanced, objective, person. I think it helped to close the gap and build trust and relationships. The first photo was what was shared in the beginning of the program at the baseline. And then the fellow went on to share the progress, the actual transformation over time, even outside of data collection. And so it was really just interesting to see and for them to feel comfortable reaching out to share what they were doing. And with that, I will pass it on to Selma for how she used photographs with the IFP Alumni Tracking Study.
Thank you so much, Shana. This was great. Also, for some of you, if you have any questions that is related to case study 1, please feel free to add them to the chat. And then now we present in the second case study, but we'll definitely take some time at the end of this presentation to address any questions or comment that you might have. So with the IFP tracking study, oh, I'm sorry, and I see that there was an I missing. It's introducing the IFP Alumni Tracking Study. We use photos for a very different purpose, or I guess we approached it differently. But before I get into how we used it and for what purpose we used it, I just want to introduce quickly the IFP Alumni Tracking Study. So from 2003 to 2013, the Ford Foundation and IFP International Fellowship Program was implemented by giving scholarship higher education access to 4,300 alumni from 22 countries. So these alumni across these 22 countries, these fellows were able to complete their higher education studies, so master, degree, doctorate, and postdoctorate, thanks to the Ford Foundation support. In 2013, when the program ended, IIE was approached by Ford, and they basically commissioned IIE, Ford Foundation commissioned IIE to conduct a longitudinal study with the tracking study. So longitudinal study is basically looking at impact over a certain period of time. And we are currently at our 7th year, and the study is scheduled to be concluded in 2024. So next year, we are actually launching the last IFP Alumni Global Survey. And that will be part of a series of 3 other surveys that were conducted in the past 7 years. So similarly to the project that Shana just talked about, we also use mixed methods to assess and investigate impact. So again, the quantitative component is covered by the alumni survey. And then the qualitative component is, focus groups, interviews, but also field work and the photo project. So we want to think of the photo project as being part of the second component of the data collection. Next slide, please. Perfect. So again, same question. Why? Why using photos for the IFP tracking study? So we had different motives and we had different needs. And I will go through each one of them to try to explain why at some point we thought that engaging with photos, alumni photos, was an essential component, but also had an added value to the project. The first point is because of the nature of a tracking study, and especially one that is as long as the IFP tracking study, as I said, it's a 10-year study. We constantly have to think about ways to engage with the alumni. And then you might ask, why? Well, because we need them to complete the surveys to ensure that the survey response rates remain to the minimum the same as the first survey. So here there's been a lot of ways that throughout the past 7 years that we engage with the alumni to ensure that they will continuously engage in the data collection throughout the life cycle of the study. But there's oftentimes we pose and asked, are we using the right means to engage with them? Or what are some of the creative and innovative means that we can use to engage with them? So we thought that the photo project, as we refer to it internally, was a good avenue for that level of engagement. So that resulted in a more frequent interactions with the alumni, and I'll explain later how. The other reason was because as part of the IFP Alumni Tracking Study, we write many reports. Some of them are issue briefs. Those are like more topic focused reports and shorter. And others are much longer, extensive reports. And as all of you may know, as all of us, I guess, when you write a report, you often need you need new photos. You also want to make sure that you are utilizing photos that are recent and of a high resolution, and maybe photos that are also recent to the impact that the alumni are contributing to. So this IFP photo project allows us to crowdsource photos from the more recent photos from the alumni. Now, why we decided to engage in this project and collect recent photos and like make it a project of itself is because beyond just the increased interaction with the alumni and beyond having access to photo project, we wanted to document change differently. And we thought that this is maybe a time to experiment a new way of documenting change. And here we decided to document change visually through the photos. Another element on like how we collected the data, we basically sent very few questions, like they're usually 4 or 5 questions. And then the next slide, we'll go through this. Via emails. And we thought that this was a very appropriate way to engage with the alumni in a much more personalized fashion. They received an email from an individual, not from a robot with system or some software. And then we asked them whether they would be interested in submitting some photos that speaks to the work that they're currently doing and the impact that they've been doing in their specific field of expertise. We asked 4 or 5 questions. We gave back the answers, and there was some back and forth. And that back and forth really humanized the conversation. It gives a story to the photos. And And then we asked them if they would be comfortable us using the photos and publish them on the website. And another element, another feedback that we heard back from the alumni is actually once the photos and along with the interview are posted on the IIE.org website, they actually been using that for a reference to their work. So I've had a few alumni scholars, they came back to us asking us like, would it be okay if I reference this? And I think it just like gives a good overview of the work I do. And absolutely, I mean, first of all, this is externally facing, so it's meant to showcase the impact and the work of the alumni via photos to the outside world. But if it gives them also the possibility to like add the link to their resume or to the LinkedIn page, then yes, absolutely. This is actually how we would like to approach this, that this is win-win, but mostly for them to showcase the wonderful work they do. Next slide, please. So these are some of the questions that we ask when we write them an email. Again, the questions are sent via email. And there is a series of questions. So the first one, can you describe the photo? When and where was it taken? We usually ask them to submit 2 to 3 photos, not more, just also to like keep the conversation very centered and focus on the photo and the moments they shared with the individuals that are in the photo. Could you share more about the people on the photo? So sometimes some of them share photos of them in action doing the work. Other times it's like with members of the community. So it's always good to have more context on these photos. We ask them how the photos link to their field of expertise. And then how do the photos make you feel proud of what you have achieved until today? Do you see a link between this photo and your experience with the premise of IFP? So the premise of IFP was that there's 2 premises, but basically it's like if people from marginalized or underserved or underrepresented communities are given access to higher education, that in itself is a contributor to social justice. So this question is really much framed by that premise. It was like, what is the link that you see between your photo and IFP and the scholarship? And then if yes, could you tell us how this photo relates to your fellowship experience? And finally, are there any additional comments you would like to add? In this question, I find it always very interesting that actually a lot of the fellows send us back either like their research paper or work that they've accomplished in the past, or like some reasoning that they have about their field of expertise and like what it should be going the next few years. Or in general, it's like just broader, like what is they stand in development in general, and like what are some of the challenges they face. So interestingly enough, the last question is the one that oftentimes provides a lot of rich information and a lot of rich insights. So what I try to do is like rework the content of the interview, and I've noticed that like I've taken a lot of from the last question and like actually put it at the beginning of the interview, because oftentimes it contextualizes what the fellow, what the alumni has shared with us. So these are some of the guiding questions that we include in the email. And as you can imagine, there's back and forth until we finalize the content. Once the content is finalized and once the 1 or 2 photos are finalized, we just shared everything back with the fellow and just make sure that like we have a sign off and a consent to move forward and share the content on the website. Next slide, please. So I'm sorry, this is too small, but this is just to give you an idea of what the interview and the photos look like once they are published on our website. For those that are interested, all of the photo projects, the IFP photo projects are under IIE.org. And then maybe Shana, if you don't mind, just like after the talk, I'll just like post the link on the chat that gives you actually access to all of the interviews and the photos. The first photo on the left is an alumni from Russia. The second photo is actually an alumni from Uganda working with disabled individuals and leading some amazing disability projects in Kampala. And then the last one is a professor in India. So we try as much as possible, because this is voluntary based. So when we send out the email asking who would like to participate in the photo project this month, so I should probably also mention that this is a monthly publication. So every month we highlight a fellow along with the photos and the interview. So we try as much as possible to make sure that we have, since the fellows are representing 22 countries, we make sure that we have all the countries represented. We also ensure that there is like gender balance in the representation, but also in a different variety in the expertise in the field and the industries. So to date, we have published 10 interviews, so 10 monthly photo project for the IFP Tracking Study. Next slide, please. Okay, so those were the two case studies, rather short and small, but hopefully they given you some insight on like how we use photo for alumni engagement, how we use photo to collect insightful data, how we use photos to hear from the beneficiaries, but in a more deep and personalized fashion. And so there are obviously benefits to utilizing photography. We are very much aware that there are limitations. And again, as I said at the beginning, we are not experts, so we are ourselves still experimenting these methodologies. And with the limitations, like sometimes it's very lengthy, it could be costly, you know, like what Shauna said earlier, that like it takes time, but it's so worth it. So we don't want to just be painting a nice, we are aware that there might be limitation to this methodology, but we do think that actually the benefits are quite high. And then if you are given the space and time and resources to actually experiment something like this, then we would highly encourage you to do so. And of course, as long as it's relevant to the work and your program projects. So the first one will be the relatively low fit for greater participants emphasize. I think we've covered this in both our case studies. Honors creative form of expression in multiple ways. And then Shana, please feel free if you would like to add in any of those. Encourages more natural discussion among participants. I think this is the one that resonates the most with us, because it humanized those exchanges, but it also gives people the space to look at a photo, reflect on that photo, share something, and then like you have prompt questions, and it just like moves the conversation into something meaningful and deep. Centers participant expertise versus am I asking the right things? So that also helps just like keep the conversation guided and framed and grounded. Invites honesty. I think this is a really important one, especially in collecting data. It's always a challenge to ensure that what we are hearing and how we interpret in the data is like aligned really with what the participant is sharing. Lots of ways to share exhibits, use the photo. I think to the case of IFP, again, we use photo projects for engagement. We use photo projects for publication, external publication purposes. We use photo projects to actually have more social media content. So there's a lot of things that actually you can do with the photos. As long as you have the alumni with the participant consent, there's a lot of ways that you can utilize the photos. And the final one is the visual program effects on participants. So these are just some of the benefits that we have seen. I'm sure the list is much longer, but Shana, I'm not sure if there's anything that you would like to add here.
Yeah, I think just to add some examples from ATI to speak more about the honoring creative forms of expression, I'm just thinking of one fellow who, at the end of our focus group discussion, when we asked, how was this process for you? How was it trying to capture something so large as agricultural transformation in one photo? And he said, I really appreciate this challenge, and that it wasn't just another survey, which, I mean, we did give another survey to collect these photos, but he was like, this was different. It made me think differently. It made me approach my work differently that day. And so he was grateful. And I think, Anytime we can do something that's different and makes people think differently is, we should consider doing that. And then to build on that point of, sharing, exhibiting, and using the photos later on, we've mentioned that this using Photovoice with ATI is still ongoing. So right now we've done this at the baseline phase before the program, and then kind of the midpoint phase. And we plan on doing it one more time at the final phase. And so I'm still thinking about how these photos can be exhibited or used, but so far they have been used in reporting. And I think that will be really important to funders and stakeholders as well, to that, pictures can say a lot, especially when put next to data. We love seeing data, we love seeing numbers, but definitely the photos help to humanize and I think tell a story. And that just makes the reporting a lot stronger to funders and to other stakeholders. And then so we'll go on. I think that kind of segues into some of our learnings, our considerations, things that we're still thinking about. And as Selma and I were talking about this across the two case studies, a lot of the things that we're thinking of and considering are the same things that we consider broadly in evaluation, right? When do we do this data collection? Do we do it at the baseline, the final, 1 year later, in the midpoint, at all stages, right? When is it most helpful? When will we get really important data? And so I think for ATI, when we first brought this as an idea to the funder, we proposed it just at the final stage, but they were really open-minded with it and said, we'd like to see it tried at all stages. And so that changed our approach. And I think I'm still thinking of what to do at the final stage, how to bring everything together to make a more holistic reflection. At that point, we'll have, over 100 photos. And so how to really bring everything together. I don't think there's one right way. I think it's a strength of Photovoice, or really just using photos, is that there's no one right way to use it, but in fact, a lot of different ways and really great ways that they can be used, and that you can invite engagement with participants. So definitely something I'm still thinking about. And then how to collect the data, right? Like that's also a basic question that we often ask in evaluation broadly. Is it best to do a survey, a newsletter, an email, personal, like, one-to-one? Here, I think it's important to consider, who's my population? Do they have internet access? Is a web-based survey the best way? Is it a large group? I don't know if I could individually email thousands of people if it's a big program. And so just a few things to consider on how to collect the photos. And then the next one, photo reflection sessions, the focus group discussions, resulted in increased networking. This was kind of a benefit that I hadn't anticipated and was so happy to see and learn about, and something that I'm trying to build space for in other programs, whether or not I'm using Photovoice. Just that there's no explicit networking component to this program. It's not necessarily integral to the goal of the ATI, but that in bringing together fellows and scholars, at the master's, the postdoc level, some who have been in the field for many, many years, and some who are new to the field, for them all to show a photo and talk about their work on an equal platform as this, introduced, I think, them to one another, introduced their work to one another, and fellows left the focus group talking about how they're going to connect later. And so that was a huge benefit that I didn't even anticipate, and was a great takeaway. And then finally, that the photo projects and Photovoice and using photos like this in a way that really engages participants, increases engagement and interaction between the evaluator and the participant themselves, it's equally empowering. It's a two-way benefit. I gained a lot of new knowledge by seeing photos of fields taken by drones that these fellows had built themselves, or seeing a huge greenhouse with rows and rows of banana crops or potato crops, learning really about the landscape, about reducing tobacco dependency in Malawi. It's something I never thought I would know about. And now I feel that these photos, really built my knowledge in this area. But also that the participants learned from each other. And that I think this type of reflection, even when done on a more individual level, as with the IFP, I think reflecting and thinking about your experience in a new way through taking photos helps people learn something maybe new about themselves too. And so I think that's everything that we've had planned for today. I do want to leave a few of these resources, and maybe we can copy them for later use as well, because again, want to stress that, Selma and I are not experts. We certainly didn't approach this, trying to reinvent the wheel. These ideas and practices came from a lot of really great work that has already been done before us. And so want to honor those resources here. So hopefully we can make them available to you. But I will stop sharing my screen, and I haven't seen a face this whole time. So hello again. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining our session. Not sure if it's going to cut us off right at 3:15.
I'm
so
not sure.
So,
yeah, just because if it does cut us off, I did include the links that I mentioned during the presentation. But I also, if any of you would like to reach out to us on a more one-on-one, please feel free. I think there's a way that we can you can reach out to us offline, off this breakout session, and we'll be more than happy to share more. But thank you for joining and for listening, and be in touch. Really, we all here to learn from one another, so we'd love to. Absolutely, thank you all. Can you share your emails to connect offline? Yes. I think the presentation itself, you're right, we did not include our email on the first slide, so Shana and I will just message you our emails in here so you have it. Thank you.
Just added mine.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll just share mine in 1 second. Thank you all for joining. Sharing my email right now. There you go. Yeah, perfect. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.